And it looks like I'm live. Uh, yeah, this is the first time I've used YouTube's new setup for this. And I decided that my ramble was going to be so long that I cannot do without just doing this live stream. So I had to figure out a whole bunch of shit has been taken away from us as creators. I guess if you want to do a hangout style live stream, now you have to basically use streaming software and use third party shit because they're not going to have Hangouts do the things that streaming software does. And this is a new laptop and I'm in my living room and I don't want to go upstairs because my art room where I usually film my YouTube videos is really hot because the roof heated up because it was a sunny day and I didn't have the air conditioner on all day. So here I am with my laptop wanting to do a live stream really quick and Hangouts don't work. Like, wow, it's been a while for me. That's how old I am, I guess. Everything about this world is trying to tell me that I'm old. So if you like the thumbnail and that's what you clicked for, uh, I was just playing around. I'm not actually that angry, but we're going to talk about these debates. So, from the first moment that Bernie got to speak, he was talking about universal health care, universal free education, and he went on to say that you'd pay more uh, in taxes, maybe, but you're going to pay less in health care, and it's all going to work out. Um, and then Joe Biden's first shot in this was that jobs are important, and basically Trump sucks. And if you're the kind of person who resonates with the Trump sucks message, then night two of the debates was your night because it got mentioned a lot that just Trump sucks, right? Um, so Kamala Harris was next, and she talked about Trump's tax plans sucking and working families need more from the government. Um, John Hickenlooper then went on to say that it's actually just really important that the Democratic Party doesn't get labeled as socialists um, because it'll help Trump get elected, and Trump sucks. And working with oil and gas industry and environmentalists at the same time is a good thing. Uh, yeah, from just the get go, I can see his point, but I could also see that it's probably not resonating with the base of the Democratic Party, especially those people who showed up to watch Bernie. Because if you're working with oil and gas companies, um, yeah, the party's not going to trust you as much. If you're making that like your big die on your sword thing to do, uh, and I live in Colorado. Here I am in the Denver area, and John Hickenlooper is a household name here. But what people are learning about him nationally is, oh, he worked with oil and gas companies. Hmm. It's like, no, actually, he did a lot of good for Colorado. But what he's putting out to the country in these debates is not the best side of it. Then Bernie chimed in, and he wasn't the first person to say it, but the very second chance he got to speak, he said Trump is a phony and a liar, and Then Kirsten Gillibrand kind of chimed in, and she wanted to say that there's a difference between capitalism and greed. Which, when I heard her making that point, I'm like, so you're kind of feeding off of Hickenloopers not wanting to be painted as socialists, you know, but really you're positioning yourself kind of as a centrist when you're saying that because uh, greed really is a component of capitalism. You have to trust in people's greed in order for capitalism to work. Uh, I'm just speaking from a different perspective outside of the party where like greed is good, you know? Um, yeah, and the way that she's defining greed as when capitalism goes wrong, I'm like, well, it's kind of a necessary component, you know? I see that I have two people watching. If anybody wants to leave comments, I think I've figured out how to read my comments while I am doing this stream. Oh, holy shit! I just split my screen. But we're gonna make this work. Okay, we're gonna make this work. Um, but yeah, uh, this ramble I will take comments, but I'm not gonna add anyone to the stream. Pretty much because I can't handle people talking over other people after watching uh, the cacophony that happened at a couple times in this debate. Really, I'm done with that for the night. I'm still getting used to this technology that YouTube has forced on us yet again. All right. So I should see if you've commented. Let me say something first. Hey, everyone. All right. Moving right along. 3 viewers now. So after Kirsten Gillibrand made that uh, really nice distinction between capitalism and greed in her mind, and how she thinks that Democrats should go forward not by trying to be socialists, but trying to clean up capitalism, as it were. Michael Bennett said that he's actually for finishing the implementation of Obamacare rather than uh, an immediate Medicare for all, which I believe, if we're to look at like the two people who are seen as the front runners on that debate stage, that's Biden's position is the incrementalism of like a slow rollout for Medicare for all, and it's our perception that it's Bernie's position that we immediately are going to have Medicare for all day one, period, as soon as it's passed. But then Kirsten Gillibrand, who was also on the stage, she later chimes in that like there actually is a rollout period for uh, Medicare for all, and that she was one of the co-writers of it, and that's how she knows that there's like this like rollout period that's going to take a couple of years. So I'm not sure what we're all fighting about as far as incrementalism versus uh, Medicare for all, except for like the the timing of it. Like, are the people who are like Medicare for America, like Beto from the night previous, or others, are they just like trying to stretch it out longer, the implementation period, until it's universal health care for everyone? I don't know. It gets fuzzy when you hear that the actual Medicare for all plans actually have phases to it too, and like the detractors are trying to say that no, it needs phases to it when they're basically probably arguing just for longer phases. Um, Pete Buttigieg got uh, the blue ribbon for speaking Spanish first on the stage, and if I remember correctly, he was the only one who spoke Spanish, and he just was saying a few words to the interviewer because woke points. It's not his first language, but you know he wasn't addressing the American public either. He was addressing a obviously Latino interviewer. So I don't know how much woke points he got for that. Uh, the next person to talk was Swalwell, and who cares what he said? It didn't resonate with me. Um, really, that's how I score it. Andrew Yang was next, and he talked about implementing a value-added tax that other industrialized countries have. He talked about basically UBI, Universal Basic Income, where he's going to give 1,000 a month to each person, and then that's going to recirculate and stimulate the economy. And he has talked about this on numerous different platforms to the point where I understand what he's saying, and I hope that anyone else who wants to learn about it can just watch him on whatever their favorite talk show is because he's been around. He went on Joe Rogan's podcast. He was on Stephen Colbert's stage. I mean, he's been everywhere. Let's see. He also talked about the technological automation Armageddon that he is basically using as the rationale for his thinking. And I agree with, uh, well, basically the challenge that technology automating away our jobs is presenting. And I agree with that being the reason that we should do uh, universal health care and universal basic income to an extent. It's because the way that our income is tied to our jobs and tied to and our healthcare is also tied to our jobs. Um, if there are no jobs, then we're going to have a lot more people with no money and no healthcare. So whatever's taking away those jobs needs to maybe just directly compensate for that loss. So I still don't see anyone in the chat. I would stop for you, but uh, let's continue to ramble. Uh, Next, Swalwell, he was talking about valuing teachers and wiping out student debt. And then there was this moment, right? He starts talking about how Biden once said that the old guard needs to pass the torch. And then he's like, well, Biden's still right. And now Biden needs to pass the torch. And then that was kind of a softball in the way that it was thrown at Biden. I mean, it was like a shot at his age, yeah, but it gave Biden the chance to have a rebuttal, right? And then so he went into his standard spiel about his CV, his resume of all the different things that he's done for America, you know, and full stop right now. I just want to, as an aside, tell you guys that I do believe that there was some engineering of these debates, right? And a lot of people are like, well, it's obvious because Elizabeth Warren wasn't on the same stage as Bernie Sanders, because they're so similar. That must have been like the one thing, and a lot of people would have wanted to see them on the same stage. Really, I don't even really think that it mattered because of the way that not all, the candidates didn't get that much time to talk anyway, and there were a lot of candidates that were just agreeing with each other on these issues. Um, and agreeing in different ways to the point where I don't think it would have been devastating for her to have been on the same stage as him and being so similar, except for the fact that she didn't endorse him. And Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk can never forgive that, you know. Um, but here's my conspiracy theory. I didn't see it during night one, but I wasn't paying that close of attention. But imagine a world where there's going to be like 20 different candidates all running in the primary. Some of those candidates are going to have to drop out early for not being able to make any headway into getting support from others. But the fact that they can get just enough support to get on that stage is political capital, right? What if the one best thing they can do in politics with their whole fucking life is to ask the right sort of question or attack the right person on the other side of the debate stage in order to create a moment, right? So Swalwell, in saying that whole pass the torch thing that was couched like it was a gotcha, but he didn't really bring up his age, but there's it's obvious that he's talking about age or experience in politics. It allowed, because of the debate rules, Biden to have the full rebuttal time because he called out Biden in his time. Anybody who was called out would then get the ability to rebut it, right? And that gives Joe Biden more time with the spotlight. This is my conspiracy theory. Take it for what you will. I believe that Swalwell's basically sandbagging his own campaign and looking like an asshole on stage by interjecting into other people's things to give certain people more time because they get time to respond to him. It's about manipulation of airtime and keeping the other people on stage to a minimum, right? So that's my theory. Right after Biden got to say his whole spiel, there was what I call the cacophony. Didn't happen in debate night one, but my girlfriend, she's got misophonia. She cannot stand uh, screechy sounds and unpleasant sounds, and that was the moment that we turned off the TV and we went out to eat to the local pho place. Got some Vietnamese food, and so then I basically picked up where I left off later, watching it on YouTube. Um, Hello, Yellow Labrador from Ireland. You were here when I filmed this at 2 in the freaking morning, US time. So what is that? 8 in the morning your time? Top of the morning to you. Let's see. After that cacophony, when I resumed watching, I felt like Kamala Harris when she Oh, it's 9 a.m. in Ireland. Sorry, it's a 7 hour difference. I didn't know that. I thought it was six. Kamala Harris, when she ended that cacophony by saying that the American public doesn't want a food fight, they want to know who's going to put food on their table. Um, she had the crowd, right? She had the crowd, and I give her like points for that. In my opinion, she came out the winner out of that entire cacophony, right? Nobody else looked good during that but her. Um, then she went into her spiel about jobs. Then they did like a show of hands, just like they did on night one. Uh, who would get rid of their healthcare plans for Medicare for all? And it was Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris put their hands up. No one else did. And so, if you're using that as your litmus test, then four total candidates did it. There's Bernie and Kamala Harris on this night, and on the previous night, it was Elizabeth Warren and De Blasio, Bill De Blasio. Those are the four you can pick from out of the 20, right? And we'll see how many of those 20 last through Super Tuesday, right? Yellow Labrador wants to know if I heard Putin this morning. No, but it's two a.m. my time. When you say this morning, do you mean uh, what happened while it's 9 a.m. your time? Did Putin say something? I don't know. I know that he was brought up during the debates as far as some of the foreign policy questions came up. So we'll get to that. Let's see. Next, Kristen Gillibrand talked about her plan for Medicare for all with that kind of rollout thing that would take a little while. Buttigieg talked about his plan for Medicare for all. And then Biden, he emphasized that we need to build on Obamacare and that we don't need to discount the gains that were made by President Obama. And basically, I feel like he's trying to cash in on the advances that Obamacare made by giving like 25 million more people healthcare coverage in America. But it really doesn't say what you're going to do forward. It just says, I've got a track record of expanding healthcare for people. Um, and he's resting on his laurels on that one. Like he's actually done an expansion of government funded healthcare. So uh, Yellow Labrador says that Putin said that liberalism has outlived its purpose. You do realize that I'm not a liberalist, right? And I'm not even Sargon's stunt double. I have nothing to do with Sargon. I just have a beard. Anyways, uh, the next thing in the debate that struck me was Bernie dodged a question. Bernie Sanders dodged a question. The question was, how do you implement Medicare for all on a national level when it has failed at state levels, right? So Bernie's answer is, we will have Medicare for all when tens of millions of people stand up to the insurance companies, you know, which it sounds great when he says it, right? He got cheers, but when I'm scoring things technically, that was a dodge. He didn't actually say how is he going to implement it, except maybe if you were to take him literally, he's saying that if tens of millions of people all go marching all at the same time, that we're going to get some change. Fat load of good that did during the Occupy movement, huh? Wall Street really changed their ways. Marching has its place. What he's supposed to be doing as a politician is not referring to marching or public support. He's supposed to be answering that question with how he's going to implement it in our government with, a timetable maybe for changes. I scored that as a dodge, and that's weird because normally he is uh, the candidate that actually brings the issues, and you know whatever. Then we had Marianne Williamson, who is she's an author, and I believe she's a little bit batty. Um, she she actually reminds me of Sylvia Brown, the psychic, as far as like her demeanor. She's a little bit more slender, but Sylvia Brown was also a prolific author in her day, and and just the things that came out of this lady's mouth, like the three times they allowed her to speak, mm, she was weird. And anyways, Marianne Williamson was basically saying Trump has something special. The way that Trump won was not on all these policy issues. He won by saying, "Make America great again," and she didn't really expound upon that. But basically, she's talking about the psychological ways that he was able to get people to uh, warm up to it. Right? Basically, she's trying to tell all of these politicians that they need to be better at being politicians. And then she went into a nice rant about how we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sickness care system where we wait for people to get sick first, and then we treat things where we could have done preventative medicine, which I believe most of the countries that have universal healthcare, they also implement good preventative medicine measures to keep the healthcare costs down. So maybe I'll get a free personal trainer. So Michael Bennett, who like Hickenlooper is from my state of Colorado, and I used to live in his district like 5 years ago. He said, well, he basically really wanted to point out that Bernie's plan for universal health care will ban competing insurances. And when I heard this, just go back to my conspiracy theory mind here about like what is someone's ultimate contribution to this primary process and politics in general in America. Senator Michael Bennett used his time right there just to point out that Bernie's plan will ban competing insurance companies. And he was emphasizing the word ban. And in doing so, I believe he was just trying to speak to like the people who aren't even Democrats. Speak to them and say, if Bernie's elected, you're going to lose the healthcare company that you like. He's going to ban it. Like People get afraid that this will become the characterization of it, because there's going to be like a phase out plan implemented that's like written into it. But he was really harping on ban competing insurance companies. Anything but cosmetic plastic surgery will not be allowed, right? And he was just like really strangely specific about it, and I just felt like the only reason why he's running for president at all was that moment where he was making that statement. He will be out of it, you know, pre Super Tuesday. He will drop out because he will not have enough support, right? Through the Iowa caucus, he's not going to carry enough of a percentage, and he's going to have to drop out. And his major contribution to this primary process will be fear mongering against Bernie's Medicare for All by emphasizing that ban, the making it illegal to have other insurances, you know. And so, just the strange way that he brought that up, it really feeds my conspiracy theory that like there's some people that are running just for the political capital to be able to do that one little thing that really kind of edges out uh, the other people. Like it's like they're uh, Donkey Kong Jr. trying to make sure that Mario wins against Luigi by, just placing a banana peel in the right place that makes Luigi swerve just that little bit that gives Mario the edge in Mario Kart. I'm I'm tired. It's late, and I'm running out of analogies. Um, Popcorn Power wants to know if I am pansexual because I slip questions in anywhere. No, just that there's a lot of different ways to reach me, and you can use any of them in order to uh, get me to answer a question. I hope that nothing I said there sounded like innuendo. Maybe reach isn't the right word I should be using. Um, anyways, the next big moment in the debates was Kamala Harris when she basically made an analogy about parents taking their kids to the emergency room and like being worried about the cost of it before they will take their kid to the hospital. And the crowd was cheering. I really feel like Kamala Harris was getting a lot of good cheers, making a lot of good points, and the others on the stage were not doing anything really good about pointing out deficiencies in her history as a politician. We'll get to that because somebody did. Um, Gannon says, "What do you think of Buttigieg inserting his religious beliefs, saying that Republicans lost all claims to ever use religious language over family separations?" Um, I like that he was pointing out hypocrisy on their side and making them think, you know. But as far as saying that God is on our side, see, I have a more educated understanding of politics than most people, and I know that Nazi belt buckles said "Gott mit uns," which means God is with us. And so I kind of shy away from all arguments that God knows that what we're doing is the right thing versus what he would do. And uh, I think the idealized God of evangelicals who never read their Bible maybe wouldn't want people to be separated from their parents as kids and put into cages and whatnot. But reading about the bloodlust of the God of the Old Testament, like literally taking all of the readings of the Old Testament and how you are to treat the enemy and other nations. I don't know that his statement really stands up to scrutiny. I mean, I think it only really fits those people who have that idealized idea of God being more moral and just than they are, and not the literal God of the Old Testament. Um, yeah, it got him applause. Popcorn Power says it got him applause, and it did. And I think, yeah, it might work in the primaries now. And to me, it was him saying, "Look at me, I'm a Christian," just like in other points of the night, he was saying, "Look at me, I'm a veteran." It's a lot of identity politics, and a white guy has to play those politics a little bit differently than other people. So he, before saying those things about the Christians in the Republican Party, he was sure to say that he represents a party that's for all religions or not religions, right? So he was basically saying he's a Christian who can accept everyone else. So he's got some identity, but he accepts other people's identity. So he's one of the good Christians, right? One that isn't going to be bigoted against people that are of other religions, even though he's about to make a statement about other people's religious beliefs, the way that they believe in the same God as him, and say that they're the wrong ones. Um, why does Agent of Doubt hate baby Jesus? I guess I'm not one of those people who thinks that Jesus stayed a baby his whole life. Just like there's people who look at like old dogs and they'll call them puppies. My girlfriend is one of them. Forever puppies, she calls them. Let's see. Everyone raised their hands in this debate about they would allow undocumented immigrants to have universal health care. If they were to come into our country, they could still get universal health care just like citizens, right? Which made me wonder that wasn't the only universal thing that was presented. The other thing that Bernie brought up was universal education, right? Free education for everyone. And there actually are other countries where if you were to go there as an immigrant, you can get free education from them, right? Um, they're in Europe, the countries that do this, and you can go to their free universities and get just as much education as their own citizens do. So what I was thinking just wasn't asked, right? They were just talking about raise your hands if you would give undocumented immigrants access to healthcare. They all raised their hand. So yay, good virtue signaling for everyone. Everyone gets a point. Buttigieg then said immigrants are good for uh, the community. Biden said immigrants are good for the community. And then we had our first break, right? The reason why that break is important, I'll bring up for the second break. Um, when they came back, Harris had a moment where she was talking about how she would, as president, release children from their cages, which is about the detention centers on the border. But in that little mini speech, she said that she will use the microphone in her hand. The president will use the microphone in her hand. And the word her in that sentence was a slight turn, which basically uh, it's virtue signaling to the I'm with her people that the next president's going to be female, right? And it was such a well placed virtue signal. Like, I got to give it credit because she is a woman. And if she has confidence in herself that she's going to win the presidency, it would be her, that pronoun. But the way that she put it in, the women in that crowd cheered, and it was a virtue signal. And I was like, man, I couldn't tell her to reword it to not be a virtue signal because it would be using the wrong pronoun for her. But it really does send the signal of girl power. And so I was like, plus 1 point, you win that one. Um, Yellow Labrador says that in Ireland, asylum seekers' kids have to pay for their education there, but it's free in Ireland, free for EU citizens, and a high fee for non EU citizens. Um, Next, we had Hickenlooper, and he said that in Colorado, we call what the president's doing on our borders with the detention centers is called kidnapping when he separates parents from their kids. Um, to me, that looked like it was scoring points, you know, when he said it, and the crowd liked it. And so he gets like plus 1 point as far as like crowd reaction. But in my mind, that is just as hollow as calling Trump a Nazi. Like, it's an escalation of here's this thing that, yes, he's technically taking the parents away from the children and treating them in separate ways, and whatnot. But no, it's not kidnapping. Kidnapping has a legal definition, and what he does with his executive orders to change the way that we treat undocumented immigrants, you know, they do have horrible effects on children, but it's technically not kidnapping. He's doing it within the law as he has had a part in making the law with those executive decisions. So it's not really kidnapping, but it played well to the crowd. So point there. Um, then Williamson, she ups the ante. The author, she says that it's collective child abuse and it's state sponsored crime, right? And as to the latter, the collective child abuse thing, I actually agree with her. As a psychotherapist, I can see the trauma that would result from being taken away from your parents, from not knowing what's going to happen to you, from being put into a cage. All of that will instill trauma and is a horrible situation to put kids through. I get what she's saying there, right? State sponsored crime um, is kind of an oxymoron. If the state is who dictates what a crime is or is not, um, I mean, who's going to call the U.S. on this and say that we are basically war criminals in peacetime for doing these detention centers? You know, what higher authority is there to say that the state is actually committing crimes than the state if the UN is toothless and NATO won't say anything to us about it because they've got their own immigration problems to deal with? Like, they're just fancy words at that point, you know. They got points though because the crowd loved it. Um, Popcorn Power says that Harris might end up pulling a Hillary. Actually, later in the debates, it was Gillibrand who was a little bit too heavy on the "I'm with her" style message. Um, Yellow Labrador says that there are 50,000 undocumented Irish in the U.S. I don't know. Let's see. So when Gillibrand got to talk next, what I got from what she was saying was that 7 kids have died in those detention centers on Trump's watch because of Trump's policies. And when I heard 7 kids died and Trump, that's all that I took from everything else that she said. It was wah 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 wah. 7 kids dead, Trump's watch. Wah 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 wah. And then she said something about for-profit prisons by the time my mind had come back to what she was saying. And for-profit prisons are bad. Why would he uh, try to employ them to handle these detained kids? You know, uh, Muhajir A says you can hold government officials responsible for state crimes. Yeah, if you consider them crimes. Uh, Popcorn Power says Trump needs to work on increasing his numbers. Um, yeah, yeah, and I feel like this debate season, he, as the incumbent, gets to wait until the field winnows down to just a few because he really hasn't decided who he is going to home in home in on yet. You know, he has attacked some of these people in the past, but I feel like he's waiting to see who's going to come out of the first few clouds of dust. Oh, Popcorn Power says he was actually referring to the kitty death toll, not his polling numbers. He says that Trump needs to work on killing more kids, I guess. Got me. You got me. Uh, wow. So, most of the people on the stage raised their hands that crossing the border should be a civil offense rather than a criminal one. I didn't really even understand like how you would make it a civil offense. Who's going to sue them? You know, but I think they were raising their hands for basically decriminalizing crossing the border without papers. Uh, Biden then went into reunite those families, and the debate moderators pinned Biden down on this question and forced him to answer if he'd deport people for being undocumented. And he said, no, only people who committed a crime would be deported, that people who don't commit a crime and are undocumented should not be the focus of our immigration department. So next, Bernie said that we need to repeal everything Trump has done, and there was a little bit of that cacophony popping up again, where people are trying to chalk over people. That just kept happening, where it's like hard to hear the person that's talking because other people just have to feed the me monster, have to get the spotlight on them, because that's the game that they're playing on this debate field. Popcorn Power wants to know if he's against sanctuary cities. They didn't even bring up sanctuary cities in this debate in either night. Um, Swalwell said that immigrants enrich his county, and that's why we should have a path to citizenship for them. Harris said that she disobeyed ICE as the California Attorney General, and she was actually directing this at Joe Biden because at the time Joe Biden was the vice president when she was the California Attorney General, and so it was the president and vice president. And Biden's really riding Obama's coattails on this election cycle, right? So she's basically pointing the finger at him at the stage, and like the way that the camera panned and everything. She was saying that she had to disobey their orders to raid houses and deport people, right? And it really felt like it was directed at Biden, that he was part of uh, an administration that was deporting more people than California would have wanted. Uh, Popcorn Power says the author woman came off as extremely weak, and he questions why she was even there. I do too, and the things that she said were so fluffy. Um, and Muhajir A says she's a friend of Oprah, and she showed up at like 1% of the polls. Okay, um, she does come off like an Oprah author. Um, the author that I named earlier in the stream was actually Sylvia Brown, who I think showed up on Oprah and Montel Williams and uh, Maury Povich and whatnot. So Michael Bennett next, he was talking about China, and then um, it morphed into him talking about his Polish mother who survived like the World War II era, and how she'd be horrified at what Trump's doing. And basically, in a roundabout way, he was calling Trump a Nazi, and those things they don't really resonate with me, but uh, he got more pop from the crowd than I thought he deserved. Then Yang was talking about. Uh, Yang said this on a presidential debate stage that Russia is laughing their asses off at us with their election meddling. And when he said that, that was basically the only curse word I've heard. Asses. Um, like this whole 2 nights, you know. Um, it made him a little bit more human, a little bit more personable, but at the same time, it doesn't reflect that presidential stature that you'd like to see in people. Um, and he talked about Chinese malfeasance as well, in a way that I felt like he was coming across as kind of intelligent on foreign affairs. Uh, Popcorn Power wants to know why Sylvia Brown isn't running. Well, Sylvia Brown, she predicted a whole bunch of different things as a psychic, but she was not able to predict when she was going to die, which has already happened a while ago. So, yeah, that's why she's not running. Probably still has about the same pulse as some of the other guys on the stage, but that that's just a joke. Popcorn Powers thinks Yang came off much more weak than his Yang Gang publicity would have led people to believe. Yeah, he was quick and to the point with every time he got to talk. Kid Canuck wants to know the location of the gym Betty went to in the Chris Watts case. Um, that's a level of detail in that case that I don't think I know. But um, there's a whole bunch of information that gets dropped into my comments all the time that I don't even want to know because people keep on doc dropping his uh, affair in my comments on my videos, and I really, you know, that case for me is kind of closed because of his admission of guilt. I was going to cover that case a lot closer if it went to trial, but as soon as we saw that plea deal of he pled guilty, I haven't been following it since. People have looked at that case for a lot of detail that I just feel like it's just not there. It's pretty uh, open and shut. Um, Muhajir A says, "How do you think Biden's performance will impact his black support? He's at 50% now. If he loses that, he will be down with the rest." Um, yeah, I feel like Kamala Harris might have like robbed him of his black support tonight, and we'll get to more of that. Uh, let's see. Buttigieg was next in the debates, and he sounded great talking about China. And then there was a break, right? So these debates were 2 hours long, and at the 30-minute point, all the way to the 60-minute point, so like the second quarter of this, the author uh, Williamson, she was not heard one time in that whole 30 minutes, right? And I don't blame uh, the CNBC staff because really she doesn't have that much good to say. But whatever. I felt like you know there's somebody who didn't get a chance to talk. Hmm. Anyways, when they came back from the break, Buttigieg was talking about an officer involved shooting in his city, uh, and there was a lot of problems with it. And Hickenlooper interjected by talking about what he did about police accountability in his city. And when Buttigieg tried to respond to that, Swalwell was like challenging him, saying like, "You should fire the chief of police, for that happening." And Buttigieg was kind of like just giving him the stink eye on that. Marianne Williamson finally got a chance to speak after like 30 minutes of silence, and she was calling for reparations and educating America about the plight of minorities. Then Kamala Harris started talking about race herself and like the things that she personally had to go through. And she was shining. The crowd was eating it all up. Uh, very powerful message to it. And then she attacked Biden for working with racist senators in the past. And this is a theme that has popped up about Biden even before these debates. That people were talking about him giving the eulogy at Strom Thurmond's funeral and saying that he was a good guy, and that like Kamala Harris just mentioning that he worked with the racist senators is going to get some of these black voters to look up what it was that he did, and that's going to lose him some of the black support. So yeah. Popcorn Power says that Biden didn't lose it during the debate. He didn't get angry, so that's important for a front runner. Yeah. He also says, "Are blacks even paying attention right now?" Uh, Hard to say. You know, what are the demographics that are watching these debates? Mm, I don't know. What is the level of Trump derangement syndrome among black people right now? Popcorn Power also says we should have Thunderdome style healthcare. Only the strongest will survive and get to see a doctor. Um, right now, it's basically only those who complain the loudest, because you're going to get denied the first few times. Just keep complaining and they'll finally see you. Biden, in trying to defend himself, he said, well, I became a public defender, not a prosecutor, right? This was like his attempt at defending himself and putting the attack back on Kamala Harris, and no one watching, except for those who are really into politics like me, understands what he meant. Because Kamala Harris, as a prosecutor, was really, really good at putting black people behind bars. And also, she was really, really good at prosecuting people for cannabis charges. So, yeah, I understood it as like, and I remember your glue thing, but the way that it came off to the crowd, she was still chewing his ass about the busing issue for schools back in the day. And he tried to counter with his resume, on race related topics. And he went into his standard spiel, and people can tell when politicians go into their standard spiel. He wasn't really addressing the direct issue about busing. He was just talking about all the different things that he's ever done for black people. Um, and in the middle of it all, he actually did what Julian Castro did the night before. He brought up the LGBT community in an odd way, just to like include them in a conversation that they really didn't need to be a part of. He was just trying to look inclusive by just name dropping LGBT. So he was coming off bad on so many fronts there. Um, then right after that, uh, Bernie Sanders got to talk, and when he talked about diversity, he brought up the LGBT community, and it landed. It actually sounded genuine when he was doing the virtue signal. Um, Then he said that we need a party that has the guts to stand up to special interests, which was a theme that he revisited many times during that debate. Christian Gillibrand says that special interests and political corruption are the root of the problem. And then Biden tried to go back into one of his me spiels about basically he's already worked on those issues before and did this, and this about political corruption and tried to get this passed about politics and corruption. Then Senator Bennett said that working with the other party won't work with Mitch McConnell. Now, this was also kind of a jab at Joe Biden because he was talking about how he would reach across the aisle and work with, you know, senators that were not of the same party to get things done. In his defense of himself from Kamala Harris and Senator Bennett saying, as long as Mitch McConnell is in the Senate, working with that other party is not going to be possible. And so um, he said that we need to win the Senate to get things done. But the way that he brought up Senator Biden allowed Senator Biden once again to have rebuttal time because anytime somebody calls out someone directly, they get rebuttal time. And at this point in the debates, Senator Biden's time management of the clock has gotten so much longer that I'm like, okay, there's multiple people on the stage who have no chance of winning, but rather than keep the debate even in terms of time, they keep calling out Joe Biden and giving him more time to talk because he gets rebuttal time. What is their purpose? You know, and specifically Swalwell and Michael Bennett, I was like, the only reason why they're running is this moment where they're getting Joe Biden more time. That's it. Uh, Joe Biden then, in his rebuttal time, got to rattle off his list of accolades on bipartisanship and beating the Republicans. Um, and then Bennett, in a strange way, see this is one of those like backhanded insults where it's like he's talking to people who are not Democratic voters. He says to Biden that the deal that he struck, one in particular that he was talking about in his spiel of all of his accomplishments, that it was actually a win for the Tea Party, right? And so it was a deal that was bipartisan. Bennett's considering it a win for the Tea Party, and you got to think who's watching this that would be from across the aisle, who's politically active and would consider maybe in one of those states where you can vote for the other party's primary, who would consider voting for Biden coming across and trying to make sure that that part of the party, well, it's the people that are in the Tea Party. So it came off as like a pre-planned insult, but also it's a call to the Tea Party members. Hey, if you're going to jump sides in the primary process and vote for uh, the Democratic Party's primary, vote for Biden because that's the one who's in your best interest versus Bernie. Um, Muhajir A says Swalwell is in it to raise his national profile. um, and he might look for a later date to run. I actually think the same thing about Buttigieg, um, based on his performance and what he was saying, and a lot of the identity politics he was using. Christian Gillibrand uh, talked about publicly funded elections right after that, um, which it's just addressing corruption in general. And Bernie then was directly asked what he would do if Roe versus Wade was struck down. And he said that he would defend women's rights and never appoint a justice against Roe v. Wade. That was his litmus test for justices. And he was pressed by the interviewer again uh, that was a dodge and he wasn't answering the question. And then, as a better answer, he said that Medicare for all will guarantee abortion rights, right? Back in my conspiracy theory mind here, the way that he was pressed on that, and then that's the answer he gave, he said that it would that his plan for Medicare for all will guarantee abortion rights. In that span of 10 minutes, Biden was touted as uh, acceptable for some Tea Party compromises, and Bernie was shown to be absolutely guaranteeing abortion rights, basically losing the Tea Party people who might be watching. And I'm like, wow, this is some political placement here, you know, some voting chess. Yeah, and Popcorn Power notes that Bernie Sanders says he's going to rotate all of the judges when he's president, and yeah, that's not in our Constitution that you can rotate judges in and out of the Supreme Court to have like a different mix on a different day. So that yeah, that did come off as weird. Um, Zealand Zen says the GOP needs to point out that Dems mismanaged the schools from all angles. Uh, okay, but the GOP isn't on the stage for Democratic debates, so it's not the GOP really. It's Trump. He's the only one who really matters in the presidential election. These are your presidential primary debates. Muhajir A says that Mayor Pete does have a good shot at VP also. I think he looks presidential and can probably look like a vice president, especially for a candidate who doesn't have the presidential look. Um, he looks the part. So next, Kristen Gillibrand said that Trump is attacking women's rights and that she could defend them. And that's when Kristen Gillibrand, to me, really started to separate herself as uh, the candidate up there that was, I'm with her, and she wants to be the her. Um, from that point on, she was really harping on women's issues more than anyone else. Then Kamala Harris said that we're in a climate crisis, not climate change. She said that Trump believes in uh, fiction, science fiction, not science facts. I mean, she had some really great one-liners and zingers. She was like scoring debate points, like bing, 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 making that crowd cheer for her. She said that she's for the Green New Deal, effectively stealing the thunder of AOC, who can't run for president this cycle because she isn't old enough. She said that we need to re-enter the Paris Agreement, which brought up the Paris Agreement for everybody else on the stage later on. And then she said Trump is the greatest threat to the U.S. because of his decisions. And it didn't come off as just a one-liner when she said it, because she went into some of the decisions that he'd been making. And so, yeah, in that moment, Kamala Harris was winning this debate and stealing a lot of the spotlight for herself, um, and just doing a really good job at it. Let's see. Zeal and Zen says he doesn't even remember Trump even mentioning education in his reelection speech. Um, yeah, and Gillibrand says, or sorry, Popcorn Power says that Gillibrand is going to have to tone down the way that she keeps on talking about women's issues after the primaries. And Orange Man Bad. Yes, Orange Man Bad was a very big topic as far as this night was concerned versus the other one. Um, so then Buttigieg was talking about his carbon tax that he would put on things to help save the environment, and then a carbon dividend, which I have no idea what he was talking about, but maybe taxing carbon emissions and giving a dividend to people who aren't causing carbon emissions. I don't know. I don't. I need to look into his plan more. Um, then he started talking about how his town had like two floods within 2 years that were like 1,000-year flood and a 500-year flood, and then that means that Indiana cities have been affected by climate change too. So he cares about it. Identity politics. He's also a climate change victim. Uh, he's got a lot of these identities that he's thrown out there: veteran, mayor, Christian who cares about other people's religions, and climate change victim. That's doing pretty good for a white guy. I have trouble getting identity politics points myself, and so I appreciate how well he's uh, attacking that angle. Then John Hickenlooper says that there's no way out of this by not bringing people together, without bringing people together. And what he meant by that was the oil and gas industry, which um, you guys might have seen on my channel before. I've made a lot of videos about all the fracking that is going on in Colorado now. It's from Colorado all the way through South Dakota, and there are a couple counties now in Colorado that are just littered with fracking, and Hickenlooper was a part of that. And he starts talking about how methane is like 25 times worse than CO2, but at the same time, under his watch, fracking has really, really grown in Colorado. Uh, if you want an example better than my videos, just use Google Maps and look at Parachute, Colorado, or look at the movies on HBO about uh, being able to light your spigot on fire when you're trying to get water out of it. They do that in Rifle, Colorado. Uh, Next, Biden said, and this was a weird one to me. Like when people start throwing out like estimates of numbers of like how much they're going to do, this one was a really weird one to me. He said he was going to immediately build 500,000 charging stations so that we can have an electric car infrastructure by the year 2030. Right? And he was kind of stumbling over like what year it would be. He was stuttering a little bit, but those were his numbers: 500,000 charging stations by the year 2030. And then he wants to join the Paris Accord and up the ante in it. And when he did that, part of what he was saying, he raised his voice in a way that I will say I give him a debate point just for like energy of what he was saying, you know. But when I think about like that's a really exact number, like 500,000 charging stations. Where did you come up with that number? Why was it 500,000? Um, do we even have that many gas stations in America? I don't know. How many gas stations do we have? And are you talking about like individual stations within what would replace gas stations? Or are you talking about locations, which would have like multiple charging stations within a location? What are you saying? Is what I was thinking. But you know, he got a little pop from the crowd. He raised his voice when he was talking about joining the Paris Accord and upping the ante, and I give him a debate point. Uh, Somebody whose channel name, I guess, is Humanity is Enslaved by Maritime Admiralty Law says fracking is unnecessary. Gull Island, Alaska has oil and gas for the world for 200 years at current consumption rates. It would be even less needed. Fracking would be even less needed if we had a lot of solar and wind power and nuclear power to replace our need for fossil fuels and get everyone on electric cars that were charged in a different way. Now, I'm still waiting for Tesla to come out with a truck, but there was just a viral video about somebody uh, chopping apart a Tesla Model 3 and creating a truck out of it. So, there's hope. Could be in the next few years. Popcorn Power says that production of the batteries for an electric car creates more carbon over their lifetime. Uh, that's a possibility. But that they create more carbon dioxide maybe during their production process does not create methane emissions at the point of drilling for the oil. So uh, and there's always going to be some products that we're going to need some oil for. But yeah, I see your point, and that was the same with the old photovoltaic cells that people used for um, getting the solar energy. You could just, with all the components that went into it and all of the resources that went into creating those cells, you could just burn oil. And over the lifetime of the cell, it would like get damaged or wear out, to the point where like you weren't getting enough solar energy to uh, really justify the oil expenditure to make it when you could have just burned that oil and had the same amount of power. Um, Brandon Henry says, lube. We're going to need oil for lube. I am not talking in innuendo here, but some people will always hear it. So after that, uh, Bernie started saying that we have 12 years before we're going to have irreparable climate damage. You know, that whole runaway effect that they keep talking about. And Swalwell kept interjecting, pass the torch, pass the torch. And basically, it was because the last two guys who were talking were old, Biden and Bernie. And that was part of that whole cacophony uh, effect that this night two has had versus night one. It made it almost unlistenable when everyone's trying to talk over each other, and then you get like something like that happen. I definitely didn't feel that Swalwell was coming off as presidential at all. You know, so what is your purpose for being on that debate stage if you're going to be so inciting that you're going to be like yelling, "Pass the torch, old guys," and people are going to hate you for it. What is your real purpose? To point out their age for the benefit of a different candidate. And I'm all about, if you're not there to win it, why are you on the stage, right? But it really just seemed to me that some people are using the political capital of being able to be up there on stage for some other purpose other than them trying to win the presidency. Welcome, Chigro, to our conversation. We're now up to 8 viewers because I'm recording at like 3 a.m. And uh, my debate coverage is actually taking about as long as the debates took because I'm giving you my insight about it. So then, Marianne Williamson, she was talking, and she was like, "I know how to beat President Trump. I know how to harness the energy of the people." And she got cut off at the end by Chuck Todd, and it was like, yeah, please, thank you. Let's move on. We don't need to hear more from her. Um, she, what little time she did get to say anything, she did not use wisely. Uh, let's see. Next, they did like they were trying to do like one word answers or 2 word answers, and they wanted to know what issue they all favored the most. So Swalwell said gun violence. Senator Bennett, he said climate and economic mobility, like Bernie Sanders has talked about, which was weird. So what is Bennett's purpose up there? Is he trying to become Bernie's vice president because he looks a little like presidential and looks a little younger because he's got color in his hair? What is his purpose for being there? But when he's talking, he was asked about what's your one issue you're going to favor the most if you're the president, and he says economic mobility, like that other guy who's running for president. You know, So Gillibrand then she says that she wants a family bill of rights, universal pre-K, and women in the workplace. Once again, all about women's issues. Kamala Harris said she wants a working family tax credit, DACA, and guns. Or what that was her answer. And then Bernie, he's like, "Oh, I object to there being just one position. We need an entire political revolution against special interests." And actually, like, even though he was objecting, ironically, the next word out of his mouth was like an answer to what is your one uh, thing. And then they moved on to the next person, which was Biden. And Joe Biden said, "I want to defeat Donald Trump." And that was a moment that reminded me of the last debate where only one person said that Donald Trump was like the greatest uh, problem that America faces. Um, Buttigieg then said he wants to fix our democracy, then everything else will follow, and all those other problems will be able to be fixed. Andrew Yang said that his $1,000 for everyone freedom dividend is his biggest uh, thing that he wants to put out there. John Hickenlooper said climate change. And then Marianne Williamson said, "I want to make the U.S. the best place for kids to grow up." Then we went to a commercial break. Uh, Chigro agrees with me that it was an echo from the last debate when Biden said beating Donald Trump was his number one thing. So when we got back from the commercial break, Swalwell was like, he was asked about what he would do about gun control because his answer about like what is his biggest uh, policy thing he wants to work on was gun control. So he said, "You can keep your pistols, you can keep your shotguns. We can take the most dangerous guns." And he's going to do a ban and buyback of assault weapons, right? So this was something where he lost me on that answer. Now, I don't own any assault weapons, right? I don't actually personally own a gun, but I know statistics, and I know statistics about violence and gun violence, and uh, we've had a couple shootings in the Denver area, like the Aurora Theater shooting and the Columbine school shooting. Right? We just had another shooting near Columbine at the STEM Academy. Near the 20th anniversary of Columbine. Right? So in my state, we a couple years ago banned a certain amount of bullets that you can't have in a clip anymore. Anything more than 10, right? So if the clip can hold more than 10, we're not supposed to be able to have them anymore. That's how we were kind of attacking the the assault rifle problem. Even though people could just go right across the border and buy a clip that will hold more, and if they were to bring it over, they're kind of breaking the law, right? Here's the deal: if you're not willing to address handguns and pistols, then you're not willing to address what's killing the most people in America. And you're not willing to address the thing that's killing the most African American youth in America. So, ironically, while you're trying to get these points for being about, oh, I'm going to protect these uh, kids that are getting shot up with guns, which, the spokesman for which are their classmates who uh, are on the white side for the most part, right? So these poor white kids are getting shot up with assault rifles. What they're ignoring is that every day there are people being killed with pistols, one at a time, more often, and the the large part of them that is African American in inner cities is being ignored by the policy changes that they want to make by banning just assault weapons. They want to ban the things that make the news because there's white victims, but they're not looking at the FBI statistics that say that it's handguns that are killing most of the people, just not all at once, right? So if they're not willing to address the handgun issue, they're kind of being unintentionally racist by promoting more African American young men dying in the streets of Chicago because they're not the ones with the assault weapons. They're the ones with the gats. They're the ones with the nines. You know, um, they're not the ones going to schools to shoot them up. They're shooting each other with pistols. And they're using the pistols because they're easily concealable, uh, and they're the weapon of choice of inner city gangs. They don't want to do anything about that. No, let them kill each other as as much as they're doing right now. We're going to take away uh, the AK-47 from the collector that might go crazy here and again, or might be stolen out of uh, his rifle cabinet by his kid who's maladjusted, and then a school shooting happens every once and again that like makes the news because there's white victims. You know, whenever I hear that they want to take just the assault weapons and not the pistols, I'm like, no. Just look at the FBI statistics on which guns are causing the most deaths. What deaths by what murders are happening by what type of weapon? The statistics are right there for every year. And handguns, you know. Anyways, Bernie then chimed in and said that he has a D-minus voting record from the NRA. So basically, his opponents not liking him is then a good thing. It's like a seal of approval when you're politically on the other side, right? Um, he then said that he wants comprehensive gun reform, which uh, I know he's probably elaborated on in different settings, but he didn't have a lot of time to speak right there. So Swalwell then interjected that his plan for gun reform leaves assault weapons on the streets, which, again, I'm going to say it's assault weapons aren't really on the streets. That's where the handguns are. Assault weapons are the ones that are being used by kids in the rural uh, communities with schools, and then like it's every once and again. But like if you look at the statistics of who's dying and by what, it's completely different than what you think. Um, Kamala Harris said that she would give Congress 100 days to enact something, or she will use executive orders to do like background checks and ban assault rifle imports, which is, it was a weird thing that she said because, if it's just the imports, then wouldn't American companies that make assault rifles just ramp up their production to keep up with demand? That's what I was thinking. Why did you say imports? Why not just like ban all assault rifles if you're going to ban assault rifles? Why did you have to throw that imports word in there? Hmm. Anyways, uh, Buttigieg then said that he's in favor of universal background checks, and said that as a veteran, he believes that there are weapons that have no place in cities in peacetime. Um, and he was speaking as both a veteran and somebody who's been a mayor who's had to deal with some of his citizenry dying from weapons. But I wonder how many of those people that died in South Bend, Indiana, died of assault weapons versus being killed by pistols. Anyways, Biden then said that he was going into a spiel about all of his different accolades, right? He said that he helped get the Brady bill passed. He said he got gun bans put into place. He said he will do buybacks. And then Biden said something even more crazy than anything else I'd heard. And I don't even know if people are going to pick up on this, but he said he wants guns to be required to have biometrics placed into them, biometric sensors in the triggers. He says, we have the technology to do this. So, like, this is my phone, right? So, this sensor right here that does you know, the fingerprint thing, right? If I use my other finger and try to do this, it rejects it and says it has that like red reject, right? I'm like, if I need my gun and I'm like fumbling over it, like, is my fingerprint gonna line up like exactly where I need it to go? Because sometimes, like, if I was just eating something and there's a little bit of oil from the food on my finger, this shit doesn't work, right? Maybe somebody might be sweating. Maybe they just don't touch it in the right way. You know, I've had like this thing not work for like any discernible reason. Sometimes I tap it, it's like, oh, it didn't recognize my fingerprint. When we're talking about this kind of technology, then putting it on a fucking gun that you're going to be trying to defend yourself with, supposedly because you feel like you need to defend your life with a gun. I don't want a fucking sensor making sure that it's me every time I pull the trigger. Fuck that. I can understand maybe having finger sensors on the lockbox, you know, but at the moment where I'm trying to pull that trigger, I don't want it to go click, 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 and then look at a screen on the side saying, "We don't recognize you right now because your hand's sweaty or covered in blood because the person's been bludgeoning you and you ran to your room to get the gun and your hand is like covered in blood. It's smearing on the sensor." You know, what the fuck kind of batshit crazy idea was that he got away with and people cheered for? Anyways, then Senator Bennett said we need to just restore our democracy at home, yada yada. Trump sucks, and then we need to restore our relationships with our allies. Um, yeah, that's going to take a while. um, then there was a question posed to all of them about which country would they first try to reset the relationship with after Trump leaves. And Marianne Williamson, in her airheaded way, was like, I'm going to talk to all the European leaders. And then, like, they kind of tried to, like, rush her and, like, shut her down because, anyway. Then Hickenlooper said China. Then Andrew Yang said China for a couple reasons. And then, like, threw in right before the next person that he's like, North Korea. And Buttigieg said, we have no idea who Trump's going to piss off before the election. So he didn't know. And that got a kind of a pop from the crowd because he was throwing a jab at Trump, right? Um, so then Biden said NATO, which that's a group of countries, not the answer that they were looking for. Then Bernie says the UN, also not a country, not the answer they were looking for. But there's more countries in the UN than there are in NATO, so I guess he won that one, right? Then Kamala Harris says NATO. Then Christian Gillibrand says Iran and the Middle East. Then Michael Bennett says European allies and Latin America, also not countries. Then Swalwell said break up with Russia, make up with NATO, which I'm going to give him a little bit of a point there because it just kind of rolled off his tongue and it was, catchy. And even Senator Bennett, who was right there, was like, that's catchy. So uh, next, Joe Biden said that he got 150,000 troops out of Iraq and that he wants troops out of Afghanistan and that we need to make sure that we repair alliances and deal with terrorism in a way where we're like going into it with multiple countries at the same time. Um, Bernie then was talking about how he led the opposition to the wars that people like Joe Biden regret. And then he was talking about how there's this giant thing going on in Yemen that isn't getting the coverage that it needs to get, where hundreds of thousands of people are going to die because of other countries around them. And then he said he wants to prevent war in Iran. And then they did a round of everyone's final message. Right? This is the thing that they all want to be remembered for at the end of the fucking night. Right? So they go with Swalwell first. And this is what I got from what he said. Diapers smell better than the Congress that he works in. And he kept saying, this generation, this generation, this generation, which is kind of on the same lines as him shouting earlier, pass the torch, old guys, pass the torch. When he kept on putting this generation is going to have to solve the problem. I really took it as him saying, those guys are old, I'm young. So one of my favorite moments of this entire night, Marianne Williamson is next. And she uses her time to say, this is how I'm going to beat Donald Trump. Trump uses fear, and I'm going to harness love for political purposes. Okay, well, okay. Then Senator Bennett said, the ability to make the U.S. better each generation is being threatened. Join me to beat Trump, which I at least thought was a very politician thing to say and look stately. Uh, More points for him than the other two. Hickenlooper said, "I reduced teenage abortions. I legalized pot. I attacked climate change, and I got near universal health care in Colorado. And we have the number one economy in America." Like, yeah, he did a lot of good things for Colorado. I live in Colorado in the place that he did a lot of good things for. But did you really have to lead with I reduced teenage abortions? Like, that's the message you want to leave people with? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then he ended with, "Don't let this party turn towards socialism because it will help elect Donald Trump." And I get where he's coming from because the word is stigmatized, but maybe educating other people as to what they actually mean by their policies and their labels might do better than just shying away from any words that conservatives are afraid of. Um, Christian Gillibrand said, "Women in America are on fire right now, and I stand up for things, and I want publicly funded elections." So yeah, till the end, like she was still on the women's issues. She is the I am with her candidate. Andrew Yang said, "Who can beat Trump? The one that solves the problems that got him elected." And he said that his freedom dividend is something that will address all of the issues that got Trump elected. He's really a one issue candidate with that freedom dividend, but he can talk about it in terms of other issues. Um, he didn't get a lot of time to speak. Uh, and I think that maybe this is a weird thing that I've learned from trying to market things personally with sales. Like when you're dealing with like door to door sales and like trying to get your business card in people's hands at like a trade show and stuff, sometimes it's better to not explain everything about the product when you're right there in the beginning because them going to research the product is the goal of your marketing. So him not talking as much might have some people look him up on YouTube to where he can get a platform like from one of his other talk shows that he's been on where he's the only one talking. It might have been a good strategy or it might have just worked out for him that people are going to be looking him up later to see what he's all about. Uh, Thank you, Darren Connard, for showing up. Red Line, hey. Brandon Henry, hey. Uh, so then Kamala Harris, she in her 45-second final words, she said, "This election is about you." Nice message. Then she said that she has a 3 a.m. agenda, right? Which to me harkens back to that whole. Uh, it's a very old commercial where it was fear mongering being used, like it's 3 a.m. in the morning. Who do you want with their finger next to the nuclear button. You know, if you guys are too young for that commercial, just know that you put in 3 a.m. political commercial, and it'll pop up. You'll be able to see it, and it's an old fear mongering commercial, and it's weird for her to allude to that with by naming her agenda the 3 a.m. agenda. Um, she said that she was going to lead with dignity and honesty, which at this point I do take as digs at Trump. Um, and she said that the American family will prosper. I think that echoed like some of the things she said before, that like American families need more help, especially in her tax plan. Um, Buttigieg, he said that he's a veteran and a mayor with experience, more identity politics from him. Uh, he talked about climate solutions, racial equality, and an end to endless wars, which at least he was talking policy with those last three things. It got down to Bernie, and Bernie turned it into a speech where he said, "How come nothing really changes? Nothing will change unless we have the guts to take on special interests." And when I say special interests, I'm abbreviating a whole bunch of other things. Like he said, he started with Wall Street, big pharma, and like all these other things. But basically, they all are special interests. But that's what he wanted to leave people with. How come nothing really changes? It won't change until we have the guts to take on those things. And that was something he talked about 3 or 4 times while he was up there. Some of those times were during the cacophonies that would happen where everyone's trying to talk over each other. He was like, "What's important is that somebody has the guts, not that it's not about age or which generation you're from. It's the guts that you have to take on special interests." So then Biden was chosen to be the last person to speak, and he said that he wants to restore the soul of the nation that the current president has ripped out. He wants to restore the backbone of America, which is jobs, 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 jobs. And then he wants to unite the U.S. We can do anything together. God bless you all and protect our troops. And the order of those last people getting to talk, to me, reminded me a lot of last night, where I felt like Elizabeth Warren having the last word was really positioning her, right? And then this night we have Bernie Sanders and then Joe Biden as the last two speakers. And I really felt like they were getting the last word, and that helps position them as being seen as the person who had the last word, giving them a little bit more boost. And so, you know, they tried to put forth that these debates were not being engineered in any way to favor someone, but there were slight little things that I noticed, like that really made me think that they're protecting the front runners, the people who are already polling well, and yeah, the way that the contribution of a couple of the candidates that were there was basically to come off like assholes themselves, like Stalwell, uh, shouting, "Pass the torch," that shit. Um, Him using his one and only chance to connect with voters to do something like that instead. It really made me think, like, He's not trying to win. He's trying to hurt somebody else's candidacy, even if it comes off that you know, he's not going to win because he's a jerk. And really, it was more about what could he get for that political clout, and that makes me wonder what is he getting out of it in the end. Uh, so yeah, that was our debates. I don't know if we're going to have any more really substantive ones in the future. I know that when we had the last election, there were like three good debates between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and I listened to all of them. And uh, one of them was a stream from NPR that I was playing over my cell phone, and I was on vacation in New Mexico. I was staying in an Earth ship, and I still was so uh, engaged by the debates between Bernie and Hillary. And I really felt like Bernie was winning those debates, in the end, just by his constant talking about policy rather than identity. But we'll see where these debates go and who gets to be in the last ones. So, a rundown of what everyone was talking about in the last minute. Uh, Darren Conard says instead of trying to make more handouts, why not address all the government intervention already in place to help prices skyrocket to where we might need handouts? I'm not sure that that's what really created the situation we're in, but I get what you're saying. Um, there's a lot of talk about free handouts, handouts. Tax the people who are think things are working out for to give to the people who are not part of uh, the workforce anymore. Gotcha. And then he says if businesses quit having government backing in running the market, competitors could drive the darn prices down, make the thing we need cheap enough. No one needs a handout. Okay. Um, Rodline says none of this matters. Our overlords at Google will determine who we vote for. Yeah, I saw that Project Veritas stuff that came out. Um, some of it, I actually thought there was one question that Senator Ted Cruz had for the worker at Google during the fallout of this Project Veritas stuff, and he was like, "Is this what Google is supposed to do?" And for one of those answers, I was like, "Yeah." If you take what the person in the video is saying, as far as like we need to prevent this situation from happening again, if Google was misused to get Trump elected in the first place, her saying that we need to prevent this could have been prevent Russian meddling. It could have been prevent Google from amplifying the extremists. You know, um, so you know, there's that. But yeah, I think overall that this week's been a pretty big black eye for Google with that stuff coming out, and then they're like, oh well, they doxed the person who worked at Google, so we have to censor it off of YouTube, and then other platforms are going to do the same thing because that person was filmed without her consent, even though she did consent, she just didn't know what it was for. You know, They actually do have a release from her. They just presented themselves as one thing, not the other. It's weird that they can just take down videos that criticize them, and of course, censorship makes things more popular. Darren Conard says, I actually supported Trump just because I wanted to see the political machine crap its pants and start putting up actual leaders instead of trained puppets. Um, I just wish it didn't come to that. uh, he says, the debates so far are making me think the Democrats still haven't figured it out. I think that there's a major division in the Democratic Party as well. It really seems to me like they're not on the same page of music either, especially when they were asked to raise their hands about would they implement Medicaid or sorry Medicare for all, and give up their insurance tomorrow, and only four of them out of the 20 raised their hands, and that's what is a big policy issue litmus test for at least half of the party. Yeah, um, there are problems. Uh, Humanity is enslaved by maritime admiralty law. Uh, we'll call him uh, Hebmal from now on. Hebmal. We'll just make an acronym out of his name. Uh, I just lost it. What did you say? Uh, Criminals will always find a way to get guns. Okay. End crony capitalism and bring back manufacturing. Oh, by the way, uh, since we're getting towards the end of my video, this video was sponsored by Robert Wallace, who gave me a Burger King uh, card, gift card, which I can use to buy food with. And this video is also sponsored by the number second and the letter amendment, because that is the policy that he uh, likes the most out of the Bill of Rights. And he talks about it a lot. Go to Robert Wallace's channel. Um, and for Robert Wallace, in case he's going to see like the end of a 2 hour live stream and then hear that he was talked about, I'll give him something to respond to. Uh, they asked Elizabeth Warren on the previous night what she would do to take away people's guns, and then she kind of said, "Well, we're not going to take away all the guns. We're going to do some research and collect data on it first." And she hem and hawing like that, and saying that we're not taking away people's guns from like deer stands and stuff. Here's how I would take away guns. Just me. Um, when I was stationed in South Korea, I had a car accident where I rear-ended somebody else's car, and I was in a military vehicle. It was not a marked military vehicle. It was a blue Korean manufactured uh, van that I was in, but I was in my uniform, and I could not understand the person who I hit, and we waited for a little while, and a cop drove by, and that cop couldn't understand me because I was speaking English. They were both speaking Hangul. We all kind of just drove to the police station. And while I was waiting there and we were hashing out the agreement of me just paying cash $200 for that guy's bumper, because basically they had no way really of going at my insurance or anything, and I wanted to stay off the blotter. I didn't want my chain of command to know that I had committed a crime such as rear-ending someone. While I was working out the deals of the deal for that with them, I saw a farmer walk right into the police station with a shotgun over his shoulder. And I immediately was like, "Holy shit, he's here to kill me because I'm not Korean." Like that was my where my mind went. Like, holy shit, guys walking right into a police station with a fucking shotgun, right? And then he walks up to the desk, and then the policeman walks him back into the armory where he leaves his shotgun. Because in that country, you're allowed to own firearms. You just have to leave them at the armory, right? And that armory for that rural area was a police station. So those police were actually used to people walking right into the police station with a shotgun right there, ready to go. And they didn't have this like knee jerk reaction of freeze. They were like, oh, you're here to turn in your shotgun because this is where you keep it. Um, I would create a system where, unless you can prove that your home has a childproof way of handling weapons, like a gun cellar that's locked with like biometrics and all that stuff, um, basically you would have to store your weapons in the local armory. And it doesn't have to be run by police. It could be a program where people could actually have a private business where they are the local armory of choice, versus the police. But you could also store your weapons with the police station. And I would institute something like that to get guns that are causing school type shootings uh, into a safer place, but still allow people to own them and sign them out in a more registered way. That's how I would, quote unquote, take away the guns that they are trying to target. I still don't think that that's going to do as much for the actual deaths as targeting handguns, but I do think that that's one step towards uh, gun regulations that are in line with our Bill of Rights, with our Constitution, where we're allowed to have like well-regulated militias and all. And if the militia itself wanted to become, the licensed place to have everyone's gun stored in an armory, for that geographical area, that'd be an okay thing to do under my plan. There you go. Yeah, Yellow Labrador says we have to have a gun cabinet here in Ireland. And Darren Connard says I need to be careful because Justicar already made a video about what it means to be well regulated. I'm not afraid of the Justicar ever watching any of my videos. I don't have enough views in order to justify Justicar ever watching me to respond to anything. Uh, yeah, and I'm not talking about controlling militias with rules. I'm just saying that those militias might be well equipped with their training to be able to run a local uh, armory for people to keep their weapons in when they want to store them and then sign them out when they need them, and maybe offer services to people to uh, help them with their marksmanship. Okay, let's see some other comments. Rodline wants to know if Darren's going to get squeezed by driverless trucks. Um, that's uh, that's something that I don't even know that I agree with, as far as like people who have this futuristic view of truck driving. And mostly it's because I live near mountain passes where I would not trust driverless trucks to not have accidents over some specific mountain passes. One's on I-70 uh, around Silverthorne, and then down on the at the bottom of the state, Raton Pass. I would not trust driverless trucks around. Lahara Pass. I would not trust driverless trucks around. It's about weight and the amount of like extra programming that they would need to be able to react to like being a heavier vehicle. I don't feel like the amount of information that they've been gleaning for free off of people having Google loaded in their phones and uh, Tesla taking all of your driver metrics. If you're just a Tesla owner, I don't think that those metrics are enough if you're going to try to translate it to filling up a truck full of petrol and then like having this giant gas container going at 65 miles an hour and then wanting uh, around steep mountain passes that program to be in control of it all. On straightaways, um, maybe. You know, Nebraska, fuck yeah. It's just those mountain passes freak me out. Um, Brandon Henry actually thinks that Google worked in Hillary's favor last election. Um, I would agree that Google, the corporation, was probably full of a whole bunch of people who supported Hillary. But here's my big but. If we're talking about the meddling issue, it's possible that some of Google's systems were used against Google, were used more for Trump as far as like SEO of certain terms and whatnot. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I think we're at the end of my show. We're at 2 hours and 19 minutes in, I guess. And yeah, thanks for watching, all 11 of you that have waited till the end right now. Um, I don't really have a good way to close out the show. I took notes, and this show has gone a couple minutes longer than the actual debates. Um, nice seeing you, Darren. Thanks for coming, Chigro. Uh, everybody. Am I actually able to see who's in the? I can only see you if you chat. So Rodline, Brandon Henry, humanity is enslaved, and yeah, that's it for this last 30 minutes. And Yellow Labrador, thank you all for showing up. Everybody who didn't get to comment because you weren't here for the live stuff, well, I'm not too pissed off because I started like 2 in the morning, so you're gonna wake up to a really long show and be able to play me in the background while you're playing your uh, Elder Scrolls Online. Is that what the kids are playing? Fortnite. You're probably playing Fortnite. with me as the soundtrack. And I thank you for doing that. Night Chigro, night Darren. Time to end the stream.